Well, it's practice day here in Boston at TD Garden ahead of the Oilers matchup against the Bruins. Welcome to the panel presented by Sportsnet. I'm Paige Martin, joined by, well, a couple of icons and Bob Stauffer and Jack Michaels. And guys, let's start with a bit of a temperature check. We're pretty well at the midway point of the season. The Oilers 24-12-3. Maybe just a thought on how things have started and progressed.
Well, I mean, how things started, was not great in terms of the results. I think the Oilers, 5-on-5 have been a pretty solid club all year in terms of shot differential and scoring chances, whether it's advanced or the basic numbers. Edmonton is, settled where I think we all thought they'd be, a top 10 club in virtually every category: goals against, shots against, goals for, shots for. I mean, they've really dictated play. They weren't getting great goaltending early, and their special teams were lousy. Once they cleaned that up, I think the results reverted to the mean, and as a result, I think if you'd asked me, hey, 24-12-3 at about the halfway point, that's where not only you'd expect the Oilers, but that's where you'd be reasonably pleased with the overall start. How they got there has been interesting. Once again, similar to last year, not as drastic a drop-off at the beginning, despite the struggles on goaltending and special teams, but certainly the same kind of, significant push where the Oilers, have the best record in the league since November the 9th. They've been outstanding over their last 25 games. I don't think that should shock anyone. It was a sluggish start, somewhat to be expected, but also, again, you go back to the oldest adages in hockey. If you're playing well in net and your special teams are going, you're going to win a lot of hockey games.
Yeah, I think for me, they are where we kind of thought they would be, but how they've gotten there. And so Jack talked about, from a team as a whole, and I'll get more into some specifics. I mean, we're watching Leon Draisaitl right now, and I know we're going to talk about him some more. He's got to be the league MVP at this stage in the season. I mean, he's leading the league in goals and even strength goals and game-winning goals, and he's like plus 22 in the season. I thought there'd be more support scoring to this point in the season, and I think that bodes well, 5v5, and I think there's going to be more of that coming. And I actually think even though the power play has been since the 23rd of November the second best in the National Hockey League, I think the power play's got more room to grow as well. So, and I think I'm going to be very intrigued at what happens over the next 3 months in terms of, will there be an addition or two along the way. So I'm with Jack. I kind of think that, 24-12-3, yeah, I could kind of seen that at the start of the year. And I'm going to go back to what Brian Engblom said to me when Tampa Bay came to town. Of course, he was part of those great Canadians teams. And he just said, Bob, when I saw you guys lose in Game 7, referring to the Oilers, I envisioned that's going to be a tough one for first few games to get over. And he said he was not at all surprised at the start. And I'll give the players credit that it was only a 3-game tough start, and they kind of worked their way through it. And, pretty much by the end of October, we're up to 500. So I think the team's good. I think they got a lot more room to grow, and frankly, I'm fairly confident that they're going to get there.
We've got very similar storylines, Paige, between Edmonton and another Western Conference contender. The only issue I have with anything Bob said is, to me, it is absolutely a co-MVP situation. I mean, Colorado and Edmonton have basically had the same season to this point. They're driven by their two best players, Nate MacKinnon and Mikko Rantanen on the Colorado side, and Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid on the Edmonton side. And Edmonton, by the way, just won 2 in a row for the first time ever when Connor McDavid doesn't have a point. Going to Bob's point, where it bodes well. They've also gotten significant contributions from the back end. Colorado gets it primarily from 1 or 2 guys. Edmonton, it's been a collective. All of their defense have kind of stepped up in, for some, new roles and new improved minutes. So I think the 2 Western Conference contenders, and for Bob and I anyways, I think our Western Conference dream matchup from an entertainment perspective, for just a collision of titans perspective, I think they are on a bit of a collision course. It's been one of the more intriguing aspects of the first half of the year.
The only difference is I don't think they're Colorado's 2 best players that drive them. I got to add Cale Makar, as much as I respect Mikko Rantanen, and that is a huge storyline to watch, Mikko Rantanen, in terms of that. He's with Octagon, the same agency that had Leon Draisaitl. Cale Makar, for me, is such an incredible difference maker that it is a dream matchup, but it's also a scary matchup out of respect for how good Colorado is. They just needed to, Chris McFarland needed to settle down their situation goal, and what ended up happening, they got another injury there. So they're going to be an interesting team to watch. But I think we both think, yeah, at the start of the year, if you told me would they be 24, 12, and 3 at the 39 game mark or whatever, I go, yeah, that kind of makes sense. I thought there'd be a little bit more support scoring. They wouldn't be quite as top heavy in their scoring, but I'm fairly confident that the team again will grow as the year goes on.
I almost feel as though there's a crystal ball in front of us, and we're going to, in a couple months down the road, see how accurate the two of you are. But let's focus on number 29. It's the same amount of goals that he has on the season where we are right now. And the way that he's stepped up, multiple games, seems like he's the best player on the ice, and he commands the game as well. He can take over the game. What do you think about what we've seen from Leon Draisaitl?
Well, this goes back, 7-8 years from when Todd McLellan, who just took over as head coach of the Detroit Red Wings, said to Leon on numerous occasions during the 16-17 season, hey, you don't have to be the second best player out there. I mean, Connor McDavid at that point was well on his way to his first 100-point season and an MVP caliber campaign. But even in that year where Draisaitl fully kind of came into his own, I think he had 29 goals, 77 points, and established himself as a legit player. And at that point in his career, Todd McLellan was saying, hey, sometimes you could be the best player. Feel comfortable in that role. And we saw it early in the year when McDavid was out for a short time. Leon Draisaitl embraced that possibility. We've seen it numerous times in the playoffs. We've seen it this year in clutch situations. I mean, he's got a 6-goal lead in the league's goal-scoring race, and he already has 9 game winners. No one in the league has more than 6. I mean, he has been clutch, and he's had a bunch of goals that have tied the game as well. So in all situations this year, he's been an absolute force. And Bob, at this point, I agree with you. I mean, I think he's got a real shot at his second MVP, and I think he's got an outside shot, at a second scoring championship. That will be harder because I think I'd agree with you that Colorado's always going to be slightly more top-heavy in my estimation.
Well, that's why.
And that's where it's going to be. That's going to be the difference in terms of the Art Ross.
If the Oilers play McDavid with Draisaitl, they're probably 1-2 in scoring. But Edmonton's got those guys split up.
Well, they're 1-4.
No, but it's so Colorado.
Right.
But Colorado loads up, Rantanen and McKinnon together. A couple things on Leon. Like, I like to think that I might have a handle of things sometimes. But even I, in my wildest dreams, watching Leon play back during the 2014 playoffs with Prince Albert against Edmonton, I wanted Edmonton to take him once we knew that the Oilers pick was going to be third that year. I never thought for a second that he'd turn out to be this good of a goal scorer. Like that, did I think he'd be a playmaker? Yeah. And then in terms of underestimating contributions, I'll look at Leon's played a lot with Vasily Podkolzin, who's got 4 goals. I love Vasily's game. I think Vasily is going to continue to grow as a player. I don't know where he's going to get to, I'll be honest. I don't know if he's going to be a 20, 25 goal scorer at some point in his career. All I know is he's a really good player for Leon to play with because he retrieves the puck and he does a great job supporting him defensively.
And his other winger has 4.
Yeah. So it's not like he's playing with 2 guys that are shooting the lights out. But that said, there's clearly a connectivity with Podkolzin and where he's fit in. And he's been for me, a real pleasant surprise with this year's team.
I guess where I'll ask you guys now is there's so much talk about this team having a veteran presence and how mature this group is. So I'd love both of your thoughts on...
They're the oldest team in the league.
Exactly.
Just because you're old, it doesn't always make you mature. I'm just letting you know that.
Doesn't make you wise.
Present company included.
Okay, so Oilers specific, what the product is on the ice. What do you think we're seeing about their identity and how that's coming together this season, especially compared to last season?
I'm not sure it's that much different, Paige, and I'll tell you why. I think it's a club that ultimately is fully cognizant of the fact that their season is going to be judged not by the outside, but by the internal group for what they do in April, May, and June. Part of that is being an older group. Part of that is having been through now 3 significant playoff runs where you lose to the eventual champion, each year. Last year, most notably, playing in arguably the biggest game in the history of the Stanley Cup final, considering all circumstances. McDavid trying to get his first cup, coming back from a 3-0 series deficit. I mean, they've been through that gamut. So I don't think their approach is that different. I think their finding ways to win on nights where they don't have their A game, not even close to it. That's also typical of a club that's kind of a veteran presence, also knows that maybe an early January game isn't going to be as vital as the games they're going to play. We're going to see some uneven performances in the future, especially in the dog days of the season. And we're also going to see some statement games where, when challenged, they're going to respond in a big way. Going into Minnesota, beating the Wild 7-1 after hearing a lot about how Minnesota had their number. Going into Colorado, beating them convincingly in regulation after, again, hearing a lot about can they get over the hump against this club. So I think we'll see a mix. And ultimately, we're going to see a team that's going to do its absolute best from the top on down to fine-tune and try to catch the opening round of the playoffs at just the right moment in terms of where their overall game is at.
So this team for 3 years has been 49, 50, and then 49 wins, and then it's played the second most playoff games over the last 3 years. I again think they still have a room to grow as a team. I do think it's a mature team. I think they know how to win. I don't think there's any question about that. They've clearly exhibited that. And knowing how to win is often finding ways to get results when you don't have your A game going. But I actually think they're going to have more to work with by March the 10th. Like once we get to the deadline, I think there's going to be, logic would dictate that there's going to be an option or two there that will help support this group as well, which is not to underscore what's already been accomplished this season. But so I'm going to be really intrigued to see how they go and if they end up being a team that wins 52 to 55 games. Because if they do that,
maybe home ice is a possibility.
And we know how significant that ended up. Yeah. I mean, the final 3 series they opened up on the road last year.
Vegas won't be easy to catch, but I think what Bob's saying is that is the one goal that might push them a little bit further. You've got to be careful because 2 years ago, I think there was a bit of an exhaustion period where Edmonton never really had its full game going. And, they beat LA in 6 and then went down to Vegas in 6 after having a real chance to win that series. But there was a lot of effort spent down the stretch trying to reel in Vegas. I think there'll be some effort, but I also think there'll be some conservation for the games. And what Bob's talking about, and certainly he could add in, I think they're going to look for a little beef in the bottom 6, a little more of a physical presence in the bottom 6, and I do expect one more defenseman to be added. And that's to take nothing away from guys like Ty Emberson and Brett Kulak and, quite frankly, Troy Stecher, all of whom are playing probably more minutes than we could have envisioned at the start of the year, and they've handled those minutes very well. But that doesn't mean you can just sit there and not try to improve because other teams are going to load
They'll
up.
have a mechanism or two to add, and so we'll see what ends up. I mean, I guess there's an outside chance they can change the dynamic in the top 6 as well, but I think the priority will probably be on the back end. But it's going to be really interesting. Again, because I think right now they're easily on pace for 50 wins. The question is if they get to 52 to 55, maybe you're having a slightly different scenario to deal with come playoff time.
Well, I remember a few months ago before the puck dropped on the regular season, we were talking about how exciting of a year it's going to be. And now that we're at the midway point, it's only going to get more and more exciting. So both of you, thank you so much for making this panel exciting as always. And thank you. The Oilers continue with this season with game number 40 against the Boston Bruins, and we can't wait for more.